Oral questions by members.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The NDP's carbon tax makes life more unaffordable for everyone in British Columbia. It also makes our companies less competitive at a time when we are already facing huge challenges in British Columbia. The newly elected leader of the Federal Liberal Party is committed to getting rid of the consumer tax, but of course the right answer is the Federal Conservative Party wants to eliminate the tax entirely. Will this Premier commit to not just eliminating the consumer carbon tax, but also to eliminate the tax increase coming on April 1st, or will he continue with his April Fool's joke on people in British Columbia?
Mr. Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. We've committed to British Columbians that if the federal government removes the carbon price backstop, that will remove the consumer carbon tax here in British Columbia. We're still going to make the big polluters pay to encourage them to reduce their carbon pollution here in the province. Climate change is a serious issue for people right across the country and around the world, and British Columbia, we're going to do our part to encourage reducing those emissions and moving to those technologies that will ensure a sustainable economy for generations to come.
Leader of the Official Opposition, supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. The reality is this. The getting rid of the consumer tax and cranking up the business tax is only going to make us less competitive. It will damage it, and ultimately it's just going to be passed on to consumers in British Columbia anyway, hiding this NDP carbon tax. This is a job killer. There's no question. It will hurt our economy. It'll make us less competitive. Businesses have already expressed their concern associated with this. So on April 1st, the most important issue is, will this Premier actually give the taxpayers in British Columbia a break and stop with the increase in the carbon tax, because clearly it's going to be eliminated in terms of the consumer tax? And will he do this without increasing the job-killing NDP carbon tax on businesses?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The member knows the April 1st increase is a federally mandated increase. If they get rid of the backstop that requires us to do that, we will absolutely get rid of not just the increase, but also the consumer carbon tax entirely. The member, though, forgets his own history, Honourable Speaker. I'm going to quote the member for Kamloops Centre, who sits right there with the Leader of the Opposition, who said about the Leader of the Opposition, quote, "The carbon tax, the same tax that," checks notes, "the Opposition Leader voted for 7 times and spoke to in the legislature as well." And then the member for Kelowna Mission, who talked about the carbon tax and said, quote, "We are seeing increasing recognition across the world that carbon pricing is necessary to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We're proud that the BC Liberal government introduced North America's first and most comprehensive carbon tax." Honourable Speaker, carbon pricing for big companies, making big polluters pay, helps encourage them to make decisions to reduce their emissions. We've grown our economy the fastest in the country last year with the carbon tax, but we're going to make sure that consumers are protected with the cost of living expenses that they're facing. We recognize that. If the feds remove the carbon tax for them, we'll do that, but we're going to still make sure that those big companies face that pressure to adopt technologies to reduce pollution.
Member for Kamloops Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, since the Premier prompted me, I might as well get up and ask a question about carbon tax as well. It's interesting, on April 1st, the carbon tax goes up 12%. Yet in this budget, it goes up 20% in revenue. In other words, emissions keep rising under this government, and the carbon tax has turned into nothing but a cash cow. So, Mr. Speaker, given that emissions continue to rise under this government, given that they now have a $3 billion revenue source in their budget, and they will not be clear what exactly they classify as a big polluter versus a consumer, is the Premier now suggesting that the $3 billion will be put over onto industry like forestry, which is struggling right now, mining, and other industries like that that are begging for actual non-existent relief in this current budget?
Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member across the way for the question. British Columbians are seeing firsthand the threat of climate change, including extremely low snowpack and the worst forest fire season on record. It's no surprise that people and businesses want to protect this extraordinary place that we call home. We are going to be getting rid of the carbon tax for consumers, but we will be holding strong on protecting our environment and making sure that we're building a place that everyone in BC wants to live in.
Kamloops Centre supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, again, this government, propped up by a Green Party, is actually budgeting for emissions to rise, and that's how they make more money for general revenue. $3 billion this year, a 20% increase in carbon tax revenues, despite the carbon tax going up 12% on April 1st. So again, the question was actually about the $3 billion and whether or not this Premier was intended to heap all $3 billion onto industries like forestry, mining, and other natural resource sectors that are begging for relief from this government, not a $3 billion tax bill.
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you again to the member for this important question. I think that we really have to remember that this is just fear-mongering. We don't want to be looking at things that are going to be hurting our environment. Big business.
Members, come to order. Minister will continue.
Thank you. You know, a lot of people in BC, they want to just do development, they want to do business at any cost, but we believe that we can do environment with the economy, and we can build a strong economy.
Members. Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. On the South Coast, many of us have had earthquakes on our mind these past few weeks, always wary of the possibility of the big earthquake. However, in BC's Northeast, residents have been shaken by the largest number of earthquakes ever recorded, all related to fracking for methane gas in the Montney region. Local residents are sounding the alarm, and for good reason. Fracking-induced earthquakes come with serious public safety, infrastructure, and environmental risks, and they will increase in magnitude and frequency with more and more gas extraction for export. My question is for the Premier. Will the province implement no fracking buffer zones around critical infrastructure to reduce the risk of damage caused by fracking-induced earthquakes?
Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And the member knows that the BC Energy Regulator regulates hydraulic fracturing to protect groundwater and to address issues of setback distances and encasing requirements, Honourable Speaker, that we've asked a scientific panel to look at hydraulic fracturing, and indeed they have, including how it relates to seismic events, impacts on water quality as well, and quantity and fugitive methane emissions, Honourable Speaker. They held 40 separate sessions, as the member will know. As he knows, it's important to take these issues seriously. Met with more than 60 experts from industry, from academia, from First Nations and others, Honourable Speaker, to address these questions. And we're going to continue to take this issue seriously to ensure that people in the Northwest and their interests are supported and protected, everyone who lives there, and that we have an industry that works for everyone in the province. And that's what I think the BC Energy Regulator, exactly what they're trying to do.
Member supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister for the answer. The BC Energy Regulator, formerly the Oil and Gas Commission, the agency responsible for managing the fossil fuel industry and other energy activities in our province, is failing to hold oil and gas companies accountable when they violate regulations. A recent investigation identified more than 1,000 instances when inspectors documented apparent infractions, yet gave the sites in question a passing grade. BC, to our chagrin, with this caucus, is on the cusp of significantly expanding fracked gas production for export. Yet there are only 17 enforcement officers, 3 technical advisors, and 7 supervisors responsible for the entire province. My questions for the Minister: how is this government strengthening oversight in preparation for the planned increase in fracked gas for export?
Minister.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker. And our government has taken action, as the member knows, to strengthen the way we regulate oil and gas development in BC. We created a new process to make sure oil and gas dams have the right permits. We brought in new regulations, he knows, to regulate orphan wells, unanimously supported in the legislature, improve monitoring of fugitive emissions, enhanced groundwater monitoring, eliminated the deep well royalty credit, Honourable Speaker, and will continue to ensure the development of our natural gas resources so important to the province is done in a way that is responsible while creating revenues to support services and good jobs for people throughout BC.
Member for Surrey Cloverdale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Saturday, I was in the downtown east side, and I was filming a documentary with CNA Singapore about fentanyl and about the NDP's failed policies. I said it was too dangerous to walk on the sidewalk in the area, but I did agree to stand on the sidewalk and answer some questions. We were on the corner of East Hastings and Dunleavy when shouting erupted about 30 feet away. Two men wielding large chef's knives, fighting, trying to stab each other. I thought, Mr. Speaker, that I was going to be witnessing a homicide. I called 911 and thankfully VPD arrested one of the men. I don't know if the other was ever arrested. All of this was captured on video. The world is watching. When will the Premier do as he promised in 2022, take ownership and end the chaos, crime, and death in Vancouver's downtown east side?
Minister of Communities. Minister. Solicitor General.
Mr. Speaker, thank you to the member opposite for the question. She raises an important question about the downtown east side, which has been for a number of years a source of concern for us. We, as the member knows, have invested many dollars into the downtown east side. Into drug interdiction members, so that those on the downtown east side can fight the problems that they face. That's something we will continue to do.
Member supplemental.
Yes, thank you, Honourable Speaker. In 2007, the Premier warned the United Nations that there wasn't enough housing for the homeless. He protested the expenditures for the 2010 Vancouver Olympics, and he argued that the money would be better spent addressing homelessness, mental health, and addictions. And now the Premier is the one in charge, and he's spending $3 billion to host FIFA 2026. All this as the City of Vancouver conducts a $5 million police operation, a sweep, that doesn't include any new housing for the homeless and no services for mental health and addiction. How can the Premier look himself in the mirror knowing that he promised to take ownership of the downtown east side and things have only gotten worse?
Minister of Housing.
Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, we have been investing millions of dollars to build hundreds of housing opportunities in the downtown east side. The member is not correct. The member is not correct that there's been no new housing in the downtown east side. I appreciate the member likes to go down there to film videos of homeless people, Honourable Speaker. But on this side of the House, we're making investments, we're working with people on the ground to actually help those people, Honourable Speaker, to actually find ways to get them out. It's easy, Honourable Speaker, to go down there to make movies, film them, to get some hits. It's easy for the Leader of the Opposition to go down there for campaign stops, to have homeless people in his backdrop, Honourable Speaker. That is not helping the vulnerable people that you say that you want to help, Honourable Speaker. The way you do it is you sit down with community, you sit down with local government, you sit down with your partners, you make investments which haven't been made for a long time, and you get people into housing, Honourable Speaker. That's what we're doing on this side of the House.
Member for Abbotsford South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, during the Vancouver Olympics, the then protester, now Premier, was busy making a name for himself in the downtown east side by actively handing out a handbook on how to sue the police and security guards. Yet, Mr. Speaker, in a classic case of flip-flopping, with FIFA now coming to town, I can't help but notice The Premier has become a huge supporter of this event. Would the Premier like to share, with this House what the budget now is to prevent the very same activists and protesters from campaigning against FIFA, Mr. Speaker?
Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Well, I'm looking forward to the World Cup. In fact, it's such a positive experience for BC that we're expecting over $1 billion in visitor spending from 2026 through 2023. We like soccer, we like football, whatever you want to call it. It's good for the province. But I would ask the member, because I seem to remember he made a name for himself.
Members.
He made a name for himself.
Members.
And it'd
Come
be
forward.
interesting. He says now he cares about homeless people. Well, he certainly didn't when he instructed his staff to dump manure on homeless camps in Abbotsford when he served as mayor. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
House Leader of the Official Opposition.
Personal security and body cameras shouldn't be necessary. At a convenience store that I frequent with my family, my constituent was assaulted, requiring facial reconstructive surgery before he could return to work. A place where he says, and I quote, "I try to have people leave the store happier than they were when they came in." He's now fearful to return to work. My question through you, Mr. Speaker, how bad do things need to get before this government takes public safety seriously? And how many people can we expect to be dropped off from the downtown core in my city of Chilliwack?
Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the member opposite for the question. Every British Columbian deserves to feel safe everywhere in this province. That is why we've enacted legislation, for example, of the Repeat Violent Offender Program. That is aimed and targeted at those people who have a propensity to commit crimes in the downtown core or anywhere in British Columbia. A former client in Prince George has told us how his contact with Revoy has changed his life. That's what we want to do. We want to make all of the community safe throughout British Columbia.
Member for Abbotsford Mission.
Mr. Speaker, this government can exaggerate all it wants about taking action. But the fact is sexual assault has doubled in my riding of Abbotsford Mission. All across British Columbia, people aren't safe at stores, they aren't safe in the streets, and they aren't even safe in their homes. What is it going to take for this government to do something? The Solicitor General used to be an RCMP officer. When will he act like it and make BC safe again?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the member opposite for the question. She draws on my past experience as a police officer to help her with the crimes that she's witnessing now. I'm was a very proud member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and I am today. What we did then is what we are doing now. We are trying to get to the core of the problem. It's nice to talk about, it's nice to have a plan. This is a government that does things about it. That's important. That's what we will continue to do.
Member for Kelowna Mission.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Firearm offences are up threefold in Kelowna. Sexual assaults are up threefold, too. Robberies are up 50%. My constituents in Rutland, in particular, are sick of dealing with drug-induced chaos on their streets. Will the Premier himself stand up and show up and tell the people at the Rutland Residents Association and the Uptown Rutland Business Association why he has thrown their community to the wolves.
Solicitor General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the member opposite for the question. It's important that we understand that these types of attacks that you see in communities and upon people are the exception rather than the rule. People want to feel safe in their communities, and we want people to feel safe in their communities. We have expanded, for example, CARC programs, one in Kelowna, to make communities allowing mental health care nurses to pair with police to tackle problems at the root of the crime. As a matter of fact, a psychiatric nurse in Abbotsford, for example, says, we're helping to bring a sense of calm to the situation, helping people get the care they need instead of escalating the crisis. We are proactive with public safety, and we always will be.
Member for Richmond Queensborough.
Mr. Speaker, people are being assaulted, robbed, and threatened with guns and knives. Total criminal code violations are up 37%. BC has turned into a post-apocalyptic hellscape. Why has this government left British Columbians to fend for themselves on BC's unsafe streets?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the members opposite for the question. I think it's important that we bring some clarity to what you see as an emerging problem in your community. Crime rates, you say, are up, but crime rates, in fact, are down. It's safer to be in, for example, Kelowna today than it was a year ago. Kelowna decreased for the second year in a row.
Members,
it's down from its high water mark ever.
Answer.
This is happening all across the province. It's alarmist of you to pick examples like you've used to paint a community. We're doing better, and we will continue to do so.
Member for Courtenay Comox.
Mr. Speaker, public order and violent crime driven by untreated mental health and addictions is surging across Vancouver Island. 1,187 assaults in Nanaimo, nearly 3 a day, 3,014 in Victoria, nearly 8 a day, and rising concerns in my hometown of Courtenay Comox and small communities across the island. While communities struggle, why does this Premier continue to ignore the crisis his government has enabled? And why was funding for real treatment options and substantive justice reform largely absent in the most recent budget?
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member from Courtenay Comox for the question. And he raises really important points around community safety, but the need to balance that with the help that people need. And that's why our government is going to continue to make record investments in mental health and substance use help supports for people. Mr. Speaker, we are working hard to build out the full continuum from detox and withdrawal to treatment and recovery and aftercare to help get people the help that they need. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue this work. There are already over 3,000 treatment beds in this province. We've added 700 more over the past years, and we're going to continue this work. Our budget 2025 sees a $500 million lift for mental health and substance use. We're going to continue this work. Thank you.
Member for Surrey Serpentine River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Across this province, this soft-on-crime government has done little to stem BC's crime wave. Break-and-enters, stabbings, robberies, sexual assaults, cops slashed, and their firearms grabbed. This is not the peace and order the people deserve. Why can't this government realize that whether it's their disgraced decriminalization program, their safe supply scandal, or how they've ruined BC's cities, that it's her entire ideological approach that has made BC the unsafe haven for crime and violence that it has certainly become.
Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This side of the House takes safety very seriously. We're putting the resources and the boots on the ground to keep communities across this province safer. You know what, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important to put on the record that when the Leader of the Opposition was on this side of the House, they cut funding to sexual assault centres. Over 30 sexual assault centres in this province were left without supports for victims of sexual assault. They say they care for victims, Mr. Speaker. I don't believe it. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about gun laws. When the Leader of the Opposition was campaigning to be Premier, he said that he would instruct police to stop enforcing semi-automatic gun laws in this province. I can't understand how that's going to keep people safer in this province, Mr. Speaker. What that is American-style gun laws in our province, Mr. Speaker. What we're going to do is hold the line on safety, Mr. Speaker, and put in the resources on the ground to make communities safer across this province. Thank you.
Member for Prince George Mackenzie.
Mr. Speaker, businesses are tired of the constant property crime in downtown Prince George, and it's the prolific offenders that keep coming up time and time again. Last year I attended a community safety town hall in Prince George, and the RCMP had nothing to say, but the catch and release justice system was completely at fault for this problem in Prince George, Mr. Speaker. What is the Premier going to give up the catch and release justice system and actually do something to support these property owners and businesses in Prince George?
Attorney General. Member. Please start.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We take bail reform very seriously on this side, Mr. Speaker. We led the country. BC led the country in asking the federal government for stricter bail laws to keep repeat violent offenders off the streets. I made sure that the Minister of Justice federally knew that we need tougher rules when it comes to long knives and machetes on the street. We're asking for more changes, and we're going to keep asking for more changes. But, Mr. Speaker, we are not stopping there. We're investing in the resources that we need on the ground right now. 12 repeat violent offender hubs across this province, circled around 400 of the most prolific violent offenders to keep them off the street. More boots on the ground with the highest investment in police officers in the history of this province. We are seized with this matter, Mr. Speaker, and will continue to make improvements.
Member for Surrey White Rock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 weeks ago, middle of the night, a senior in my ridings awakened, his door kicked in, savagely attacked. Bloodied, flees to his neighbor for help. Short time after that, suspect goes to the hospital, tries to disarm the police officer, and has to be restrained by the physician that's attending him. This Premier, in the October campaign, tried desperately to talk tough on crime. Today, desperately, they try and talk tough on crime. The problem with this all is that everybody here has a story about how this government is failing on crime every single day. So, my question is this. In 2020, when this government called the snap election, one of the reasons was involuntary care. This Premier got up, campaign stop after campaign stop, and he talked about involuntary care. This government has failed every single day to protect British Columbians because they don't have the stomach, they don't have the budget, they don't have the resources to actually do what they say they're going to do and make sure they are doing and getting involuntary care done in this province. When will this Premier stand up and walk the walk and actually do as he's going to say and fulfill one campaign commitment and get this done?
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. We're launching secure care facilities in this province, with the first one in Surrey opening later this month. The second one will open in May.
The bell ends the question period.